Are you journeying through grief and needing a little extra support, inspiration, healing, and guidance? Join me in turning your losses into gains. Hi, my friend. I'm Tara Accardo, creator of the Losses Become Gains online community, blog, and now podcast. I'm an only child who lost both parents to cancer within 6 months of each other, followed by my sweet fur baby soon after. After all of this, I knew I was meant to do more with what I had been through. And now, that means supporting and empowering grievers just like you. I'm a wife, friend, grieving daughter, writer, course creator, loss advocate turned grief coach, and I'm here to support you and move you through your grief. I want for you to feel like I'm your friend in the grief space and know that whatever you're going through, there's someone out there who just gets it. Few topics are off limits here because grief and loss don't hold back either. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what all of this means for you, some coping tools, lifestyle topics, and impactful mindset shifts to take you from just surviving to thriving after loss. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and show up with an open heart and mind. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and today we're digging into all of the coulda, woulda, shouldas of grief. So really, this is kind of just another way of saying the guilt and regret that we might feel and experience, but these statements, man, I could have, I should have, I would have done or said or whatever it is differently can be debilitating in our grief. And this is something I really want to acknowledge today. And it's something that I really hope this episode will help release for you a little bit if this is something that you are really struggling with today. So to start this off, I've heard all kinds of coulda, woulda, shoulda statements. And not only have I heard it from other grievers, I have heard it from my very own brain and things that I have been through in my own grief journey. I have heard and experienced grievers express regret that they, for example, didn't take their loved ones to the hospital sooner. People who regret that they were running an errand or going to sleep or taking a shower or getting food, whatever it was. But then in that very hour or whatever it was that they did that, their loved one died. People who believe that they should have known more or realized something sooner, known perhaps that their loved one was depressed, maybe to the point of suicide, because there are people out there I know that feel this way. And we beat ourselves up over these things, known that, this trip to the hospital would be the last or might be the last, and they should have been more present or taking advantage of that more somehow. The list goes on. We want to believe these things. We almost have to believe these things to keep ourselves sane. I know that sounds funny, but we're going to get into why here. But we almost want to beat ourselves up for these things because that suggests that we are actually powerful enough to prevent death, or it certainly at least makes it less awful than it is. Whether or not we realize it, we almost want to believe that we have control over death, or at the very least, the past. That X wouldn't have happened if Y did. If we were just more adequately prepared or vigilant about something, whatever this looks like to you. If we believe the death only happened because we took our eye off the ball, so to speak, for just a moment, then we can believe that staying more alert or going back and doing it again differently will prevent it from happening, would have prevented it from happening, will prevent it from happening again. But it will. It does. Death happens. Grief expert David Kessler points out that if any of us were truly capable of preventing death, we would be very famous and in great demand, right? Because who wants to really experience the death of someone that we care about? But he also points out that guilt is our mind essentially playing a trick on us, or it is perhaps actually really trying to protect us as brutal as it can be, because ultimately, while guilt is still very valid, guilt and regret is a distraction. As painful as it is, it's not as painful as the pure, raw grief that we experience. Guilt really, in a way, fills our head with noise that keeps the worst pain that we feel at bay. And sometimes we don't even realize this is happening. But guilt and regret, it kind of gives us something to do. And again, sort of keeps us busy in a sense. So, how do we cope with this? How do we navigate this? So, your gain from this episode today is pretty straightforward. It is to learn how to cope and navigate those feelings of we coulda, we shoulda, we woulda said or done differently in our grief. That's it. But before we get into all of this, we have to kind of take a step back and disconnect our guilt and regret from the grief. So let's play a quick game. For argument's sake, maybe we woulda, maybe we coulda, maybe we even shoulda. But the thing is, we didn't. That is a hard fact. But let me tell you, a lifetime of self-loathing and misery, none of that will change that fact. I anguished over my coulda, woulda, shouldas in the months after my mom died, really because I felt like I could have been there for her more in certain ways. And spoiler alert, I couldn't have been. I was doing the best I could at the time. There were times where I wish I was at the hospital with her more, that I had just somehow made an effort to do X, Y, Z. That wasn't the reality at the time. That wasn't what I was like emotionally or even physically capable of doing. And this is not about me and my story, so I won't get too far into that. But then I felt the same way about my dad when he died. I felt like I was not there enough for him when my mom died. Like I could have been checking in on him more. You guys, I was checking on him plenty. I don't know where this really came from, right? But sometimes these thoughts are a bit irrational, that I could have been more supportive. Again, for argument's sake, let's say I could have been, or I should have been here at the house with him more, or whatever it was. Can I change that now? No, he's been gone for over 3 years. And again, spoiler alert, I too was hanging on by a thread with my mom's passing. I didn't know how to navigate any of that. Like he had never lost a wife before. I had never lost a mother before. So at the time, we were both doing everything we could. And I still had a full-time job and a boyfriend at the time and a geriatric dog and all of these things. I've talked about this on the podcast before, so I'll leave my story there. But, we have to also consider like what our environment is or was like and the circumstances going on that are present at the time that we're now feeling this guilt and regret from, right? With both parents, I relished in guilt and regret for not being a better daughter, for any time I yelled or got in their face about something, for being a defiant teenager and being unnecessarily sassy for things when I shouldn't have been at times, for not going with them on, random family outings for the day, like when they really wanted me to come and I didn't feel like going. I just wanted to hang out and be on the couch and watch TV or whatever. Like, how was I to know that they were going to die as early as they did? I didn't know that at the time. All I was doing was I was living my life, blissfully living my life as so many of us do. And these are the things that we sometimes realize we took advantage of. Now that they're gone, this is so common, you guys. You've probably experienced this if you're listening to this podcast. Like, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? And unfortunately, that most difficult lesson in life to learn that are these loved ones being gone. That's where a lot of these coulda, woulda, shouldas come up, because we're learning, you guys, we're evolving. This is what grief can do for us, though. This is what it teaches us. It's unfortunate, sure, that we have these thoughts or that we, it's like, yeah, oh my God, I wish I had done this differently. And you know what? Again, for argument's sake, since we're playing this little game, maybe we could have. But we cannot change those circumstances that already happened. All we can do is be present and focus on the present and learn from that and do better next time. Be better humans and souls now, from now on. And my guilt and regret and these coulda, woulda, shouldas did not stop there for me. I felt this again when my dog died the following year after my dad, because basically what happened with my dog is I was the one who approved this rabies shot at the vet. They were insistent that she needed it. She was 19. I did not feel in my gut that she needed this stupid rabies shot, but they were insistent. And I went against my better judgment and I had them give it to her. You guys, within 20 minutes, she was having seizure after seizure. And I will spare you all of the details because that's not what this episode is about, but she was gone. She died 2 days later after absolute hell, after 2 visits to the emergency overnight vet. It was a living hell. And that burden I felt was entirely on my own shoulders. It was a level of hell and regret I have never experienced in my life. Like, I thought it was bad with my parents, but like at the end of the day, I knew I didn't cause their cancer. Like, I knew that. But in this instance, I hands down was convinced that I killed my dog and that my vet had a hand in it. And I let him know that because I was so outraged by this whole thing, right? This is like what grief does. It does not give us the most rational thoughts. I'll never know what would have happened with her health had that vaccine not been given to her. That is something that I have to live with. And every time I felt myself going down that dark rabbit hole of regret, honestly, basically how I came out of it is I didn't ignore it, but I kind of had to just slam the door on that urge by saying to myself, it is too late. You cannot go back and change it. That is a fact. There is nothing that can be done now. It's too late. That is a hard realization and thought to grapple with. That is not a fun fact to have to wrap our heads around. It is difficult and almost unbearable, really. But here's the thing. No amount of rumination can change that. So I continued to close that proverbial door to those coulda, woulda, shoulda statements over and over and over again. And I almost had that, you can't go back and change it. There's nothing that can be done. You can't go back and change it. There's nothing that can be done. That was almost like a mantra for me over and over. But what this does is this weakens the neural connection between our grief and our guilt. Because as the saying goes, neurons that wire together, fire together. And I'm no scientist here, but I've certainly heard that before. And that was very enlightening for me. And I think it's so true because I no longer wanted my parents and my dog and their memory linked with guilt and shame and regret. And nor would they want that for me either. And I'll tell you, eventually, this strategy worked. Now, do I still feel this way at times? Absolutely. Like, I actually, low-key just, that triggered a little bit of something in me telling you that story of my dog just now. I'll never feel good about that if I'm being really honest. But more times than not, now thoughts of all 3 of them, whether together or separate, they don't immediately elicit these feelings of, what could have been done differently. I am remembering them for the good quality parts of their life that they did live. So maybe we can learn something from this guilt. Maybe we can learn something from these coulda, woulda, shouldas. I want you to think about that for a second. Maybe we can be better people. Maybe we can be more thoughtful with our decisions and actions and listen to our gut. That is something that situation taught me. And make a note about that and act on whatever lesson you might glean here. But I think it's important to also note that sometimes there is simply no lesson. There's no lesson, you guys. Sometimes death just happens. Death happens to everyone. And like it or not, more often than not, we're powerless to stop it, even with the best of intentions. It is completely out of our control sometimes, and that is very unsettling. I want to acknowledge that. Once our loved ones are gone, they're gone. Shutting down the coulda, woulda, shouldas is not easy, though. It requires reality testing. It requires a really strong will. It requires patience. It requires a lot of things. But think about it. Isn't the loss alone painful enough? Like, really, why inflict more pain on yourself when it changes nothing? It changes nothing, right? So let's take yet another step back here before we get into a lot of these like coping tools that I have for you today. Why do we experience these coulda, woulda, shouldas? I just kind of alluded to a lot of this, but there's really kind of two things that it ultimately can sort of be bucketed into. Again, this is very high level today, so bear with me. But there's ultimately two reasons why we might feel this pang of guilt and regret. Number one is because we actually really did something wrong. And as much as people are quick to say something, wasn't our fault, we shouldn't feel guilty, the reality is that we all mess up in life sometimes. We make mistakes, and those sometimes have consequences. And for me, like with my dog example for a moment, like I can't help but consider that a mistake. I can't help but feel that that was me doing something wrong. But here I was trying to trust a professional. And now I'm kind of like, well, what does that guy know? Right. But nobody could sit there and tell me, like, oh, it wasn't your fault. She's gone. Or, oh, you shouldn't feel guilty. Listen, at the end of the day, I know I shouldn't. But having someone impose that viewpoint on me or be like, oh, you should or shouldn't do something, that doesn't help us either. That's not going to get us there any faster, right? Simply put, sometimes we fail to do things we wish we had done or should have done or could have said differently, whatever this looks like for you. Perhaps it's as large as a grievous error in judgment or a mistake that perhaps led to a death. It's how I feel like it was with my dog. But it could also be something as small or as hurtful that we said or something that we maybe failed to say. Maybe we're really feeling this guilt and regret because we feel like we did something wrong. But let's be very clear. Just because you feel guilty about something doesn't mean that you are guilty. That is a hard thing to wrap our heads around. I know. And there are many, many times that we as grievers are, I'm just going to call a spade, we're a bit irrational. Because let's be real, grief can make you a little bit crazy. We dissect every moment of our time with our loved one or loved ones. We consider every coulda, woulda, shoulda you could imagine. Our irrational brain will find just about anything to feel guilty about, despite being irrational, which we can't just simply ignore. So I don't want to do that here. I really want to acknowledge, these thoughts, they're coming from somewhere, even though they might be classified as irrational, right? Either way, the guilt can be consuming. So that's kind of number one of where these coulda, woulda, shouldas can come into play. Another one is because we want order. This is a big reason for why we experience guilt and shame, though as grievers, we can sometimes fail to see this connection. Without someone or something to blame, we have to accept that the universe or whatever powers that be may be unpredictable and chaotic. And as humans, I've said this before earlier, we don't love that. That does not sit well with us sometimes. If we think we could have done something differently that would have changed the outcome of a loss, that in and of itself can provide comfort that there's sort of a rational order to things, that we have some sort of control. Now, whether or not we feel good about that, we can still feel the guilt and the shame and the regret, even if there is some semblance of control there. But oftentimes, death is so much bigger than anything that we can control, right? If we accept that we never could have known or changed the outcome, we then have to accept that some things that happen are completely outside of our control too. That is really hard to do. A perception of control, however inaccurate, is often more comforting than considering that we have no control at all. And for me, this really came out in the anticipatory grief of my parents when they were both sick and on their respective declines. I wanted control in a time that felt very out of control. And that was a really complex thing to navigate. That being said, I am coming at you with some ways to cope because that is what I do best. And all of the things I'm going to talk about here have absolutely been helpful and successful for me in my own grief journey, but also those that I have coached as well. So just want to plant some seeds today, give you some things to think about, and maybe try for yourself if you haven't put some of these methods into practice yet. So number one, consider what the guilt is about. We have to take I keep saying a step back today. We have to take a lot of steps back today, apparently. We have to think about where these coulda, woulda, shoulda statements are coming from. Is it rational? Is it a little irrational? Is it about that control we just talked about? Where is this stemming from? I would highly encourage you to journal this actually and maybe write it out or even like in a voice note on your phone, because typically even more comes up for us when we really dig into this. Because so often our thoughts of guilt, again, whether rational or irrational, those can really start to consume us. They can drag us down into this bottomless black hole full of isolation and despair and far too much wine and Ben & Jerry's and any other crutch that we can think of. And we don't typically feel guilt and regret for no reason. I think that's really important to say, right? And that might seem obvious, but really think about that. So it's important to take a moment to recognize that and become aware of this. And when we do, and when we begin to understand the why behind it, we can better notice it when it arrives, and we can kind of tackle it a little bit that way. We can meet it where it's at. Again, it's not to tamp them down or ignore them or push them away. It's not about that at all. It's just being better equipped when those triggers or when these things do come up, that we can have those little mantras I mentioned earlier in the back of our heads, like, it is too late. There is nothing that can be done now. You can't go back and change it. And be honest with yourself here. If your feelings of guilt are a bit irrational, admit it. I had to do that. It's hard to do. It's not always fun to do. But if you realize you're kind of going off on some tangents and spinning a little bit out of control here, this is where we have to bring ourselves back to the present and be like, you know what? I got to be really honest with myself here. This is not the most rational thought I've ever had. And this doesn't mean dismissing your feelings of guilt and regret. Absolutely not. It means acknowledging that although you might feel guilty, you may not actually be guilty. Some common examples are acknowledging that you did the best you could with the information you had at the time. That is certainly something I've had to say to myself, that you couldn't predict the future. There were many other factors at play other than just your behaviors. Sometimes it's not all about us, but as humans, we tend to make it about us, and so much more. So being honest with yourself about your guilt is important, and accepting that our grief, this guilt, this regret that we're feeling in our grief is sometimes irrational, that can be helpful. So number 2 here is to acknowledge your feelings. It is essential to allow yourself to feel and process your emotions. I have said this pretty much on every episode of this podcast, I feel like at least once, because trying to suppress or deny these thoughts and feelings may actually make them more persistent, which ultimately makes this process even more painful and prolonged, right? As I always say, give yourself permission to grieve and experience all of the emotions that come with it. All of the anger, all of the resentment, all of the pain, the guilt, the regret, the longing, it all needs space and time to be seen. Always. Number 3, mindfulness and self-reflection. Mindfulness and presence practices are so important when dealing with the coulda, woulda, shouldas of life. And if you think about it, this guilt and regret are very much taking us out of the present, right? We're very much living in the past and wishing things were different when we ruminate and when thoughts come up like this. So, techniques to stay in the present moment to avoid getting caught up in the rumination is really key. So, this could look like meditation, deep breathing, journaling. All of these can help you gain insight into your thoughts and feelings and allow you to take a breath and come back to yourself and back to the present moment. And I also just want to mention, I have a freebie on my website, on the Losses Become Gains website, under free tools for you here. If you need help getting started with this, or you just need a little bit of help overall. I also have some really exciting plans to help you dig into this more coming in the next year. But more than anything, this is something I'm really, really passionate about, you guys, because it can absolutely turn your grief around. And it's something that I really love helping people move through on a more personal basis. And one of the ways that I do this, I'll just mention quickly, is in my Intentional Life After Loss membership and community. If you haven't checked that out yet, seriously, you're going to want to. All of the details about that are in the show notes. You can learn more there on my website. But this is something that we get into in way more detail, and I help you step by step along the way. So definitely check that out. Number 4, have self-compassion and forgiveness. I always preach this, but be kind to yourself. Grief is a very complex process. It's a very individualized process, though you do not have to do it alone. What I mean here is that it's unique to you. It's natural to have regrets and thoughts of what you could have or should have done differently. And if I have not said that today, please let it be known. It's okay. It's okay that you might be feeling this right now. It is a completely natural and normal part of the grieving process. There is no shame in feeling any of this. But I just want you to remember, as we mentioned earlier, sometimes we're doing the best that we can with what we're equipped with the information and resources and life experience that you had at the time. So if you don't know this already, please hear me now. It is time to forgive yourself, my friend. Forgive yourself for any perceived mistakes or actual mistakes that you might have made. Any regrets. Remember that you are human. No one is perfect here. And those coulda, woulda, shouldas, they have weared out their welcome. Consider listening to this episode like, okay, you're done. I've given you enough time and attention. It's time to work on this now. It is time to move forward. There is no place in your life for them now because they are not adding any value to your life now either. So it is time to focus on what you can control. And that is the present. And that is your present and future actions and thoughts. That's it. Have you heard about my brand new Losses Become Gains daily journal? I am so proud to announce you can now get your hands on it exclusively on Amazon. But trust me, you don't have to be someone who's grieving or someone who has gone through a loss to use and enjoy this journal. For over a year, I knew I wanted to create a beautiful daily practice in the form of a journal that wouldn't take you a super long time to complete, but will add so much value and perspective to your day, no matter what season of life that you're in. The prompts are specifically designed for people going through loss by someone who has also gone through loss, but it's just general enough for anyone to use and asks the important questions that, at least for grievers, I know for a fact that they need to have in front of them each and every day. It's a daily prompt with a separate page for writing more thoughts if more comes up for you. There are 6 months worth of prompts in this journal, so you can really see your growth and progress right before your eyes. It helps you get to the root of how you're actually doing and what you need to focus on in your healing journey or daily life overall. And it comes in 3 ocean-inspired colors. Like the ocean, I want this journal to empower you to let it flow, allow yourself to really dig deep and go beyond the surface of your grief or whatever hardships are coming your way, and really feel the healing, growth, and evolution that I know you are so capable of. And all in just a matter of minutes per day, that will become a welcome part of your routine. I have no doubt. Type in Losses Become Gains on Amazon and be sure to scroll down to find all 3 colors or click the link in the show notes for details. Pick up your copy of the journal today or as a gift for someone who could use it. Number 5 in this list of coping tools today is to seek support. I feel like I put this in nearly every blog post and every podcast episode that I share at some point, and it's because it's true and it needs to be heard over and over and over again. You guys, I wish this was something I had realized earlier on in my grief, that more support and help was available. But here's the thing. What's so interesting about this grief space is so many grievers don't even realize that they need support, or they think that, just the support that they're getting from their family and friends or whatever is sufficient. And in a way, that might be true. I am not here to speculate on your situation or anyone else's. But let me remind you, being just okay does not a beautiful, vibrant, amazing life make. You are meant for more than that. And that is so possible, even with our grief. Our grief and our joy, they can coexist. So, as always, I do encourage you, share your thoughts, these coulda, woulda, shoulda statements with family and friends. But really, this is actually where I would recommend more of a therapist or a counselor or your friendly grief coach. That's me. Because so often, a lot of people, they don't know what more to say other than don't feel guilty, don't feel that way. It's really hard for people, I've noticed, to hold space and be like, you know what? Yeah, that's a crappy situation. I understand why you're feeling that way. A lot of people, they don't want you to be in pain, right? So they're quick to try and help you through it. They want you to see the positive and all of the things, but then we're left feeling very invalidated and like we just have to kind of move on and get over it. But that's not really addressing the grief. That's not addressing these feelings of guilt and regret. So when I say seek support here, I mean, absolutely making sure you have a good support system around you, but this is really where I would recommend some more support, some more professional support. And another reason for this is what's great about talking about your regrets and fears and whatever else is coming up for you is that it can help you process them and gain perspective, right? Again, we might have wonderful friends and family around us who mean well, but sometimes it can be very surface level. And sometimes the support and everything just kind of stops right at oh, don't feel that way. Your loved one, they wouldn't want you to feel that way. But we're not really resolving anything there. So a trusted person, a trusted professional can take that a step further and dig into it a little bit deeper with you, because this is one of those things where we really have to get to the root of it. to start feeling better. And a trusted person, whoever this is for you, can provide not only just an ear, but some additional emotional support, some additional coping tools. So, that being said, make sure whoever you reach out to is exactly that for you: supportive, someone who, doesn't make you actively feel worse and not seen and not understood and invalidated, because this is often what can make us go inward and really kind of shut down. That is the last thing that we need to be doing. And if these thoughts of, coulda, woulda, shoulda become overwhelming and interfere with your ability to function, which can happen to many of us, that's where it might be helpful to seek support from a professional who can provide you with the guidance and strategies and tools to really cope with this once and for all. So, again, I just want to offer Intentional Life After Loss, my community and membership here. It is a very digestible way to wrap your head around all of this and really take some action-focused steps and have these reliable coping tools served to you on a silver platter each and every month. There's this beautiful community component to it that you can participate in as much or as little as you're comfortable with fellow grievers who really get it, who are not just going to tell you, oh, don't feel guilty. They wouldn't want that for you. All these platitudes that as grievers, we just get so tired of hearing sometimes, right? But also remember, just a friendly reminder, I do offer one-on-one coaching as well. If this is something you are interested in or feel called to explore or feel might be more appropriate for you and your needs, all you got to do is shoot me an email at hello@lossesbecomegains.com. Let's have a conversation. So just to close out that support section, I just want you to know you have so much support at your fingertips. You have so many resources for you, and it's all here, ready and waiting should you ever need it. Number 6, focus on the positive. Now, before you start yelling at me from wherever you're watching or listening to this, I know you might not want to hear this one. Bear with me. Really, I don't mean this as black and white as it sounds. It's not like find the positive, focus on the happiness. It is not about that. While it is essential to acknowledge your regrets, I want for you to also try to remember and reflect back on the positive aspects of your relationship with the deceased, whoever this is for you. Or again, maybe this isn't someone deceased. Maybe you are mourning a friendship where the person's still very much alive, but you've been friends for a long time, maybe had a falling out, and now you're mourning that. Maybe this is a relationship or a divorce, whoever this is for you. Maybe it involves reflecting back on the good times that you've shared with them, which I know can be very painful, but maybe even acknowledging and celebrating their life and the moments that you did share together, but ultimately coming back and understanding that that is now over. That is not your present and that is not your future. But understanding that that does not mean that we then have to feel hopeless, right? Because think about this. In addition to giving time and attention to our loved one who is no longer here, there's so much opportunity to look around you and in your present too. What positive, beautiful things are making up your life right now? There has to be something, hopefully, one thing. This can be as simple as your morning cup of coffee, maybe some birds chirping outside, maybe you getting some fresh air, just feeling the sun on your face, whatever this is, eating your favorite chips and watching your favorite movie. Okay. I mean, nothing is too big or too small. Gratitude is everything in our grief. And it is absolutely something that we sometimes need to work up to. That is not something that we might feel depending on where you're at in your grief journey today. Trust me, nobody could have told me to be grateful for a damn thing when my parents and dog died earlier on. Absolutely not. But now, being a little bit further removed from it, I assure you, it's there. And I also just want to mention something kind of interesting here. There is something called thought stopping, And it is a technique with some mixed reviews in the mental health crowd from what I've heard, but I just want to present this here. The idea is that when you notice a negative thought taking over, for example, guilt, make a conscious effort to stop and replace the thought. Now, I just want to mention here, I know I've said in this episode today, and I very much stand by this, that I don't want you ignoring this. I don't want you tamping things down. So don't misunderstand me here. Though it might not be quite this simple and straightforward, there is value in having a positive thought ready and available to balance out these negative or like guilt-ridden thoughts that you might experience. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can discern the difference. It's not ignoring. It is allowing this, let's say, negative thought to come in. You realize it's here. You're like, oh, okay, you're back, right? But building up sort of our arsenal of positivity, building up our toolbox of mantras or positive thoughts, or just being able to soak in the beauty around us, to be like, okay, you know what? I see you. I hear you, negative thought, but I counter you with this positive thought, whatever this looks like for you. So, for example, if you are feeling guilt that you are not there at the moment that your loved one died, hi, I have been there. That was me with my dad. When that thought comes up, be prepared with a thought about the many times that you were there. That is verbatim how I was able to move past some of the regret that I felt in not being there for my dad's death and trying to grapple with him dying alone versus my mom, whose death I was there for. Number 7, determine what you have learned. Yes, my friend, guilt and regret often teach us something, whether we care to believe that or not, whether or not we realize that yet. But it can be something about ourselves, something about the world around us, the people around us, things we would do again, things we wouldn't do again. We can learn and grow from almost any emotion or experience. So take some time to consider what your loss and these resulting coulda, woulda, shouldas have taught you. Is it to be more open-minded, to have more patience, the importance of being present and mindful? Is it gratitude? I would love for you to journal on this and see what comes up for you. And I also just want to mention here, speaking of journaling, remember, if you did not know this already, that my Losses Become Gains daily journal is available on Amazon, and it is specifically designed for grievers by a griever. That is me, yours truly. And it really helps you tap into all of this and so much more. Highlights of your day, things to be grateful for, kind of tracking your grief. It's such an intentional, amazing tool, you guys. I really hope you check it out. It's linked in the show notes here for sure. It's on the website, all the good things. And it's really just an amazing daily practice. And it takes just minutes to do. So I know how journaling can feel. It can feel very overwhelming. I wanted to take the guesswork and all of this intimidation out of it. So if you haven't gotten yours already, or if you have not seen this before, definitely go check it out. Number 8, take action and set some goals. Despite any coulda, woulda, shouldas, you can use these feelings ultimately to help others around you. And what you do may come out of the things that you've learned, like we just talked about. So, for example, whether it's educating others so they can avoid the mistakes that you are now feeling guilty about, right? Raising awareness about perhaps a cause of death, anything from like heart disease to substance abuse to suicide, certain types of cancer. That is something I have certainly done with esophageal and prostate cancer in my own community. Encouraging others to talk with their family or loved ones about end-of-life wishes. I know that is not a fun topic, but it is so, so important. Whatever it is, you can use your experiences to help guide and support other people. And that is such a beautiful gift, right? And it is not something that you can truly speak to unless you've been through it. That is like, if you know that and you are a griever and you're listening here, you know that better than anybody, right? And additionally, your regrets can be used as motivation to make positive changes in your life. It does not always have to be doom and gloom here, right? And listen, this doesn't always feel possible or even palatable in our grief. So if you are feeling resistant to this right now, I hear you. Don't push this on yourself. You really can't push this on yourself. But I do always plant the seeds, as you know, if you are a listener here. But I also just encourage you to challenge yourself a little bit. And my ask here today is to just consider how you can honor your loved one by living in a way that aligns with their legacy and what they brought to the world and their values, but moreover, your own. Because this is about you at the end of the day. And believe it or not, goal setting can actually be really fun and very inspiring. I love to do vision boards. I have various Word documents for myself. I mean, it's something I'm kind of addicted to. I get really into it. And I'll just note, this is something that we dig into more in depth in my membership and community that I mentioned earlier. I help walk you through this. We really work on not only the grief, but okay, what does this day-to-day look like now? And then, that is my role as a grief coach. It is to help you through the present grief, but to also look ahead a little bit and how to even grapple with moving forward. Because as grievers, goal setting and this planning and looking ahead, this is a more difficult and complex process than it might be for someone who is doing this who has not seen some serious loss, right? For us, it might be more emotionally taxing. It's harder to see the light, so to speak. And the idea of setting goals can feel so far off from anything on our mind right now. We might just be so wrapped up in the grief, in the what now. But that's exactly it. That's the point. And I have to tell you, this practice can be absolutely revolutionary in your grieving process. So it is not one that you should ignore. And I am here to help you not ignore it. In fact, I'm here to help you through it and walk through it with you. But it is ultimately a process that we do have to just do when we're ready. And we can't force it, but we can certainly challenge ourselves a little bit. So that's all I want you to do today. Number 9 is to create a legacy. I love this point so much because any excuse is a good excuse to honor our people, of course. So I want you to just use this as an opportunity to discover meaningful ways to remember and celebrate their life. This could include creating a memorial, starting a scholarship, maybe participating in activities they enjoyed, maybe picking up a hobby that they enjoyed or something that you did together. While I know this can be very painful to do a hobby like this again, I've been there, I know, but all in due time, as always, whatever this looks like for you. And remember, there could be some trial and error here. That's okay. Just embrace the process. That's it. Take it a day, a moment at a time. There isn't a practice we need to put pressure on ourselves to do here. It's more about just making the gesture and making that feel good for us. Bottom line, our loved ones are no longer embodying this physical being we're in. No matter where you feel they are now, wherever it is, that's fine. That's wonderful. But we just have to remember that the physical needs and wants and desires that we feel here in our physical form no longer apply to them. So, really, of course, we can make this about the legacy and memorial. We can make all of that about them. But just remember and take solace in the fact that they are safe and they are okay wherever you choose to believe they are now. Do this for them. Sure, absolutely. That's beautiful. But make sure you're doing this for you first and foremost. This is about you now. This is about your why. So number 10, last but not least here, what would your loved one tell you? I love this practice. I actually have to do this fairly often. I've had to do it more now that I, as of this recording at least, am pregnant and I'm trying to navigate this. It's been a ride. It's been complicated. It's been complex. And there are so many things that I wish my parents were here for, questions that I could ask them, advice I could get, anything. So to just get you thinking about this a little bit, get yourself in a space to truly focus on thinking about your loved one or loved ones, right? Imagine telling them how you're feeling right now. Your regrets, your guilt, your coulda, woulda, shouldas, all of it. If there are things you wish you had said, say them. Write it out, talk it out in a voice note, draft an email, and perhaps maybe don't send it anywhere or just send it to yourself. The point is, I know a lot of people that do this actually, and the point is really just for you to make it feel like it's out there, that it was sent to them somehow, right? It can be a very cathartic practice, honestly. You could do a similar practice with a letter too. Maybe you just don't send it or you send it back to yourself or something. Journal your thoughts or just meditate on all of it. You don't have to write any of it down. Just be with yourself. Find a good meditation practice that resonates with you and just be. That is one of the most beautiful and underrated practices of all. And we can absolutely kind of channel our loved ones more than we think we can when we get into these meditative states. And I like to think that they want to talk to us too. They're eager and ready and waiting. We just have to open up to them a little bit. So imagine what your loved one would tell you right now and what advice they might give you, or how they might receive your thoughts and feelings of these coulda, woulda, shoulda statements, and what they might say to you if you express that to them. So to wrap this episode up, let me just say, no one, certainly not me, ever said dealing and coping with these thoughts of I coulda, I woulda, I should've were easy to cope with. They're not. I want to acknowledge that, and I want to meet you where you're at right now and give you a big virtual hug as I do it. But my hope is that this episode today gave you some things to just think about and ponder as you continue navigating this process and navigating your grief. And know that you have so many fellow grievers out there that have these ruminating regrets and feelings of guilt right along with you. They are there with you as well, and you are not alone. And absolutely, we all experience them in our own way, of course. And, these feelings can be very isolating. I say this not only from my own experience, but from those that I have coached and worked with as well, that you might be feeling these feelings of guilt and regret so deeply and intently that you almost can't express how hard it is to move through it to other people around you. But I also, amongst all of the coping tools and all of the things we talked about today, I hope you also realize that there are tools out there to help you both at Losses Become Gains and everything I offer and beyond. As always, I am so grateful for your time and energy and for hanging out with me today. I truly hope this episode was helpful for you in some way. If you liked what you heard today or did find it helpful, or you are just loving what you're hearing on the podcast so far, I would truly appreciate a comment or a review on whatever platform that you're listening on. It means so much to me, and it really just helps me be able to reach more grievers just like you. So with that being said, I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you in the next episode. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps that you're taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, to learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog and for more coping tools. Explore my Grief Becomes Gains online course if you need some extra grief support and coaching. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your story, and supporting you however I can. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.